Devilated is an insanely brutal and violent mix of a boomer shooter and a hack and slash with some light RPG elements that was developed by Trunka Games and published by Neon Doctrine. With some humor sprinkled in as well, you play as the character simply known as Deer, voiced by Gianni Matragrano, and Devilated takes place in a vast assortment of beautifully abstract, hellish environments, where so many demons are to be slain, gold is to be collected, weapons are to be acquired, and corpses are to be consumed. Running in Unity, Devilated is a gorgeous game with a striking and unique art style that uses what I assume to be cel shading. It's definitely one of those stop every now and then to take in the scenery type of games. Every level is unique in its theme and color palette, and the different enemy types are numerous as well. Prioritizing the most dangerous enemies is always of the utmost importance, but most fights devolve into a flurry of chaos, gore, and destruction. Not that I'm complaining. Combat is fast and furious, and it is aided by fun weapons that require zero reloading, by the way, and magical abilities and movement abilities. In this game, you can run, double jump, and dash, as well as glide through the air once you have acquired the wings. In addition to this, health is typically regained by consuming the corpses of your enemies. But this process can be made even more streamlined once you acquire the ability to launch tentacles out of your mouth. Said tentacles then reach out to grab weakened humanoid enemies and pull their bodies into your gaping maw for nourishment. So, firing your weapons while frequently clicking on the use key is a major part of the gameplay loop. On top of that, other magical abilities like this are acquired with skill points, and other abilities include a temporary shield, a poison bubble, a freezing spell, and a rage mode, just to name a handful. The fighting itself is also not just limited to firing guns. Deer can also wield a melee weapon such as a sword, axe, or shovel. Yes, a shovel. And such a weapon can be used simply by clicking on the right mouse button, which makes the combat feel so smooth as there is no need to switch between your melee and ranged options. This kind of makes the game feel a bit like Shadow Warrior 3. Alternating between shooting guns and slashing with a sword is seamless. And speaking of influences, I definitely got some heavy Painkiller vibes from Devilated, and Serious Sam as well, just due to the sheer number of enemies that you take on at a time. Of course, there is also the push-forward combat that is reminiscent of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, plus I also got some Diablo vibes from the light RPG elements, which would include the collecting of gold, of course, as well as shopkeeper interactions and the inventory screen. Weapons, ammo, grenades, and health can be purchased from the shopkeeper, but I found that the best weapons were located in the environment. All of the guns in Devilated feel very good to fire, with some punchy and beefy sound effects, and the way that they jib enemies and rip them apart. It should also be noted that many guns carry attributes like explosive damage, freezing damage, or poison damage, and every weapon has statistics on base damage, fire rate, and accuracy, which makes it a little easier to compare when you're trying to figure out which weapon you want to use. As far as what you can carry, you have 4 weapon slots, the first being for handguns, the second for machine guns, the third for staves, and the fourth for rocket launchers. On top of this, you have an additional space to coincide with each slot, so that if you run out of ammo, for instance, you can switch to another equipped weapon in the same category, without said weapon taking up space in your inventory, which is a much appreciated feature. Speaking of the inventory, this is meant to store whichever weapons you don't have equipped, as well as to store charms that give you a health or damage boost as long as they stay in your inventory. If after reading over a weapon's stats or using it and it isn't to your liking, you can simply sell it at the aforementioned shopkeeper. Other things that you can do in the inventory screen include spending gold on upgrades to initial ammo counts, opening new inventory slots, or upping your max health. I also cannot stress enough that there are so many weapons in this game. The literal finger guns are a definite standout. And many of the staves are acquired from boss fights, with such items often being the boss's head or just some sort of representation of the boss that can be used to launch the same attacks that the boss used on you. And on the topic of boss fights, there are 16 per each playthrough, one at the end of all 16 levels, and many of them have multiple phases. In fact, all of the boss fights are very enjoyable, suitably challenging, and well-designed. Very well-designed. Especially when you consider that most boss fights in first-person shooters are not very innovative. This is quite the achievement. I mean, think about it. There's a boss at the end of every level, and all of them are designed really well. I mean, that really cannot go without being praised. It should also be noted that before every level after the opening level, the player has a choice between playing 2 different levels. What this means is that after a first playthrough, New Game Plus can be started with all of the weapons and abilities that you have acquired, and all of the levels that you skipped can then be played for the first time. Another plus of doing a New Game Plus run is that you can go through the game with a shotgun that was acquired after defeating the final boss. A quad-barreled automatic shotgun that destroys most enemies in one shot and absolutely melts bosses.
Dr. Frankenstein to bring me. You grumpy, ugly fuck. To live is to suffer, they say. So I give to you this blessing.
It's honestly worth doing another playthrough just due to the existence of this weapon alone. So just to make this very clear, this means that if you do a first playthrough and a New Game Plus run, there are 30 unique levels that you can play in Devilated. And now that sounds kind of normal for a boomer shooter, right? But you also got to keep in mind, some of these levels can take 45 minutes to even an hour to beat. Some of them, not all of them. So that makes for a beefy game. And this is an absolutely astonishing amount of content on offer. One criticism that I can see being leveled against Devilated is that the gameplay loop can get a bit repetitive, but for me personally, I didn't mind. I never got tired of the carnage, and I would definitely recommend Devilated to all fans of boomer shooters. It is extremely fun, weird, and beautiful. Devilated is a boomer shooter work of art, and Deer is easily one of the most powerful FPS protagonists of all time. And with that, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like and subscribe, and dislike it if you absolutely hated it. As always, enjoy the rest of your day.